Hello there, Homeschool Nolan here to help you navigate learning in the digital age. The digital age has certainly changed the way we learn, the way we work, and the way we live. But one thing I've learned is that despite all the hype, the tech companies that helped shape our digital age are not immune to normal economic cycles. And if you follow the news, you may have noticed that a lot of tech companies lately have been announcing layoffs. And some of the folks I know and work with are starting to get nervous. Now, I myself have been laid off a couple of times before. And while it's been over 15 years since the last time I was let go, I'm under no illusion that it could never happen to me again. But I like to think that I have learned some valuable lessons from my experiences. And today, I'd like to share some warning signs, if you will, that indicate whether you might get laid off if you happen to work for a tech company or any company that's going through tough times. I'd also like to offer a few tips on how to survive if your company might be laying people off soon. Now, before I do that, let's first review what I mean by layoff. A layoff is when a company decides to eliminate a number of positions or entire teams. Now, this is different from a firing, which is when companies decide to get rid of a specific individual person. Now, most firings I've seen aren't the result of incompetence, but rather because of intense personality clashes or conflicts, or people simply not being able to get along and work together. That said, companies will often use layoffs as an opportunity to select people they've been wanting to get rid of, but didn't have the guts to fire during better times. Now, during layoffs, usually what happens is that companies will decide that they need to let go an X number of people on a team, or a certain number of people who hold the same or similar title and responsibilities. Now, every company, of course, can do things a little bit differently, but it usually comes down to making tough decisions with a spreadsheet, and then managers making very personal and sometimes emotional decisions in deciding which people to let go. And this leads me to my first piece of advice if you want to avoid getting laid off, and that is don't complain or push back on your boss. Now, this may seem obvious, but when times are good and jobs seem plentiful, a lot of workers feel more confident and empowered to challenge their boss and push back on their colleagues on things they don't like. We sort of saw this at the end of the pandemic when a lot of workers pushed back on the idea of returning to the office when a lot of companies were trying to bring them back. I myself believe that I got laid off for the first time many years ago, largely because I pushed back on my own CEO. See, over 20 years ago, during the height of the dot-com bubble, I joined a small internet startup as a software engineer. It wasn't long though before I noticed the company wasn't doing too well. And one day, the CEO, apparently out of desperation, asked if I could help out with sales and call up prospective clients on the phone and try to schedule meetings with them. Now, me having never done sales before, I pushed back. And then the CEO told me he was a bit disappointed in me that I didn't jump at the opportunity. And then a few weeks later, I was laid off. Now, I know sometimes an employer can ask you to do things that you don't feel comfortable with or don't really align with your values. So if you do need to push back, try to at least frame it in a positive tone rather than in an argumentative or confrontational manner. For example, instead of saying something like, "That's a dumb idea," say things like, "Well, have you considered this instead?" Or, "Hey boss, what do you think of this approach instead?" If you need the paycheck, but truly don't get along or don't really feel your values align with your company, try your best to just smile through your teeth and don't complain while you quietly look for another job. Now, if you do jump ship and land another job, beware of my second warning sign that you might get laid off, and that's LIFO. Last in, first out. When companies have to choose people to let go, it's much easier to pick the newest employees who haven't yet had the time to develop relationships and show what they can do. It also costs companies less money to lay off, according to LIFO, because severance packages are usually based on the length of service. Hence, the newer the employee, the less severance the company has to pay. This lesson hit home to me the second time I was laid off back in 2007. I had jumped ship and joined another company because I thought the grass was greener on the other side. I took the role of OEM systems engineer, but just a few months later, after I joined, our OEM partner decided to end our OEM agreement, and I and my fellow OEM program manager, who joined the same time as I did, we were both laid off. However, the manager of our team and our boss, who had been with the company much longer than us, he survived. I believe the solid relationship he had developed over the years with senior leaders at the company really helped him survive the elimination of our entire team. Of course, longevity at a company alone won't save you from layoffs unless you prove that you can deliver and you are worth the money. And this leads me to perhaps the most common reason a person can get laid off, and that is they are overpaid. Remember, companies do layoffs to cut expenses. What better way to cut expenses than by getting rid of overpaid people? The question, of course, then becomes, how do we know if we're overpaid? Most of us probably feel that we're underpaid these days, especially in times of high inflation. Well, in my opinion, if you're able to get by in your job by working just a few hours per day from home while collecting a nice paycheck, you're probably overpaid. But the biggest indicator would be if there are others at your company who make a lot less than you, but can pretty much do the same work as you do. The harsh reality is that most of us are very replaceable. And if we're making a lot more money than other folks who are pretty much doing the same thing and are just as productive, then that makes us an easy target for getting laid off. I've seen this happen to quite a number of employees and colleagues over the years. When times are good, it's easier to negotiate a higher salary coming in, as companies feel like they have to compete for your talent. But if you don't deliver, that fat paycheck can make you into a fat target as well. So, if you are fortunate to have a much higher salary than your peers, just make sure that you keep delivering, that you exceed expectations, and keep learning new skills. Speaking of learning, if you're looking for an online platform for learning, check out study.com. Study.com has over 8,300 engaging videos in language arts, math, science, and many more subjects, and at all grade levels. I use it with my son, and we find it a great way to support his homeschooling as well as my own supplemental learning. Use the coupon code HOMESchoolNolan and get 30% off the first 3 months. Check out study.com today. Now, none of us have much control as to whether or not a big company decides to do layoffs or not. And complaining too much, being new, and being overpaid are all factors that can increase our chances of being let go. But the good news is that these factors are also within our control. And I hope this video has been helpful if you've been feeling a little anxious lately about layoffs. Let me know what you think in the comments below. And don't forget to click subscribe for more videos like this one. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.